Before smartphones were in everybody's pockets, before online play, downloadable games, and digital storefronts, there was a time when having a computer in the home felt like something out of science fiction. Starting in the 1970s, a new kind of machine began appearing on desks and kitchen tables: the home computer. They weren't just for playing games, they were tools for learning, experimenting, programming, and sometimes even cracking. For a generation, these machines were our first real interaction with technology. We typed commands instead of clicking icons. We loaded software from cassette tapes and floppy disks. And if something didn't work, we didn't update it. We just had to figure it out. Some of these machines would change home computing forever, while others would fade away quietly into history. But all of them played a role in building the foundation of the digital world we live in today. Let's take a look back at some of the computers that mattered, the ones that we grew up with, learned on, and still remember to this day. Welcome to A History of Classic Home Computers.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. In a world of fun and fantasy, and ever-changing views, and computer terminology, Commodore is news. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
The story of Commodore 8-bit computers really starts after World War II. In November of 1947, Holocaust survivor Jack Tramiel immigrated to the United States, where in 1948 he joined the U.S. Army. While in the Army, he learned how to work on and use office equipment such as typewriters and mechanical adding machines. After being enlisted for 4 years, he was honorably discharged in 1952. He moved to New York City and became a cab driver. In 1953, he secured a $25,000 loan to start a business from the U.S. Army Entitlement Fund. Jack had started a typewriter business, but needed to come up with a catchy name. Because of his time spent in the military, he wanted something that had a military title, and this is where he came up with the name Commodore. He named the company Commodore Portable Typewriters and began selling Czechoslovakian typewriters. This also became an issue, seeing that Czechoslovakia was a bloc country and was embargoed by the US. So he set up Commodore business machines in Toronto, Canada, and started having the parts of the Czechoslovakian typewriters sent to him there, so CBM could assemble them and sell them in North America. Pretty sneaky. However, the business was not very successful, and by 1962 it was in financial trouble. Cheap Japanese typewriters were flooding the market, and the old Czechoslovakian typewriters were just no longer profitable. At this point, Canadian businessman Irving Gould invested $400,000 into Commodore to relaunch the company as an adding machine business. Tramiel and Gould started to work together. Gould suggested that Tramiel travel to Japan and visit their rivals to learn why they were able to outsell American companies in America. During this trip, Jack saw the first digital calculators and decided that the adding machine business was not going to be profitable either. Commodore started producing calculators using integrated circuits from Texas Instruments. But Texas Instruments, being the savvy business people they were, saw Commodore making a profit off their own chips and decided to make their own calculators themselves at a much lower cost. Because they owned their own chip fab, they could outprice Commodore substantially, and Commodore got burned again. Tramiel and Gould were not finished. Gould invested another $3 million into Commodore so that they could acquire MOS Technologies, which was a semiconductor manufacturer. Now Commodore could make their own chips and compete with the likes of Texas Instruments. It was at this time that lead designer of MOS Technologies, Chuck Peddle, met with Tramiel and told him calculators were not the future, computers were. Peddle had just designed and released the Chem 1 computer, a hobbyist computer using MOS's own 6502 microprocessor and two 6530 ROM-RAM I/O timer chips. It was a huge success with hobbyist computer geeks, but Jack wanted to market a full computer using this tech for home, business, and education. This was the beginning of Commodore PET computers, the first successful computers that Commodore had produced. Although available for the home market, It was more geared towards business and education. Trammell saw that other companies like Apple and Atari were selling personal computers with color graphics, and he needed to do this to stay competitive. Commodore's Bob Russell designed the VIC-20, a personal computer with color graphics. The VIC-20 was the first personal computer to sell over 1 million units and was Commodore's first big success. In 1981, MOS Technology started a project to create the next-gen sound and graphics chips. They were named SID for the sound interface device and VIC-2 for video integrated circuit for graphics. The SID chip was designed by Bob Jans and the VIC-2 by Al Charpentier. The new chipset was first used in the Commodore Ultimax, designed by Commodore of Japan's Yashi Teruakara. Now, this was an interesting system. It was designed as a game console using the new chipset, but only had 2 kilobytes of RAM, no BASIC, and only used cartridges or a tape drive. So this really was a Franken console, half computer, half game console. Like a lot of game consoles in the early 1980s, they just couldn't make up their minds what they wanted this device to be. It wasn't very successful, with only a few units that were produced for the Japanese and American markets. It was about this time that Russell, Jans, Charpentier, and Charles Winterbull, a manager at MOS, pitched the idea of a low-cost successor to the VIC-20. The VIC-20 was successful but underpowered. Trammell wanted to create a low-cost, powerful personal computer with stunning graphics and sound, and he wanted it to have 64 kilobytes of RAM. Now, RAM at this time was still very pricey. It would make the computer very expensive. But Jack being Jack knew the market, and by the time the computer was being produced, the cost of the RAM had reduced significantly. It was at this point that Jack coined the phrase, computers for the masses, not the classes.
At the lowest price to the masses. We are a company which we like to sell to the masses, not to the classes.
Okay.
The project was named VIC-40. The computer was to be shown at the 1982 CES show in January. The team worked for months over Thanksgiving and Christmas to complete the hardware and the software for the project. They completed it by January of 1982, just in time for the show. It was in the same case and used the same basic ROM as the VIC-20. It was shown at CES at a selling price of $595, and the crowd, along with the Atari reps, went wild. How could they sell such a powerful machine at such a low cost? Well, the same way that Commodore had been priced out of the calculator market, now they own their own chip fab, bringing Commodore's cost per unit down to $135, giving them a huge profit margin. Commodore was competing with the likes of Atari, Texas Instruments, Tandy, and Apple, and also supplying chips to them. Within a matter of months, a pricing war started. The price of a C64 was reduced down to $299. Texas Instruments lowered the cost of the TI-99 to just $99, taking a loss on each unit. By October of 1983, TI pulled out of the personal computing market completely. Commodore got its revenge on TI for what they did to them in the calculator market years earlier. But not all things were great for Commodore. C64 early production models had a high failure rate due to a defect in the PLA design. This was corrected in later revisions, but the damage had been done. In fact, rumors started circulating that the C64 would be discontinued by 1985. But sales of the unit stayed strong as Commodore continued to revise the motherboard and cut costs, bringing the savings to the consumer. Rumors of its discontinuation fell flat as sales rose. Then in 1984, during a closed-door meeting, Jack Trammell and Irving Gould had their final falling out. It's not clear really what went on in this meeting. Some have said Trammell wanted his sons to be on the board and have control over the company, while Gould disagreed with that. Some have also said that Gould stated that he didn't like the way Trammell was running the company. Everything had to be approved by Jack and projects were being put on hold because of this. Years later, after Jack's passing, his son stated what was really said during this meeting. Jack had brought up how Gould was using company assets on himself, cars, jets, trips, etc., instead of investing that money into the company. 3 days later, Jack resigned from the company he worked so hard to create. This left Gould in charge of Commodore. Also during this time, there were several models of the C64 created. First in 1983, the C64 bread bin was introduced. Commodore released the all-in-one unit, the Educator 64, in schools as well. Then in 1984, the SX64, a portable, luggable C64, was introduced. It was intended for the on-the-go businessman. Also in 1984, another Commodore series besides the C64 was introduced, the Commodore 16 and Plus 4. The C16 was to be an entry-level computer to replace the VIC-20, while the Plus 4 was a budget productivity computer with built-in apps such as a word processor and spreadsheet. In Europe, they had the C116, a model that was even more cost-reduced. None of these were very successful and were discontinued within a year of their release. In 1986, Commodore released the redesigned C64C, the same C64 computer but with a revised motherboard and redesigned case. In 1987, Commodore released the C64 Aldi, which was a C64 with a C64C motherboard, the shortboard, and a bread bin style case. They were sold in German Aldi discount stores. The last true C64 model was introduced in 1989, the C64G. These were like the Aldi but had a lighter case color and were sold in the European market. The very last iteration of the C64 was the C64GS. It was released in 1990. This was a C64 that was consoleized and used only cartridges and had no keyboard. This product wasn't very successful, only selling 20,000 units. There were also two spin-offs of the C64, the Commodore 128 and the C65. The 128 was introduced in 1985 and was compatible to the C64. It was a vast improvement over the C64 with 128 kilobytes of RAM and had a Z80 processor so that it could run CP/M if need be. The C65 was to be a 16-bit successor of the C64, still compatible but not 100%. Incompatibilities with the CSG65CE02 processor caused issues. The project started in 1989 but was discontinued in 1991 due to the competition within the company of Amiga and the fact that computing was starting to move on to the 32-bit generation. By 1990, the 8-bit computer line was all but obsolete. Commodore's leadership and Irving Gould was blowing money at a rate that Commodore could not keep up with. Since the sales of the C64 had slumped to almost nothing and Amiga sales were struggling, also the failed C65 project, Amiga CD32, and the multimedia Amiga CD-TV, these factors just did the company in. In March of 1994, Commodore announced the discontinuation of the C64 in 1995, but the company itself didn't make it that long. In fact, a month later, Commodore filed for bankruptcy and all products were discontinued, including the C64, as the company was liquidated. The story of Amiga begins long ago, reaching way back into the late 1970s at Atari. At the time, Atari founder Nolan Bushnell had just sold the company to Warner Communications due to financial struggles. With Warner in charge, Atari's workplace culture shifted. Programmers were no longer credited for their creations, and instead of focusing on a new game console, Atari used its cutting-edge technology to develop the Atari 400 and Atari 800 8-bit computers. This decision frustrated many at Atari. Bushnell eventually left, and so did engineer Jay Miner, who had wanted to design a new console powered by the Motorola 68000 CPU. When Atari rejected the idea, Miner walked away. Around the same time, several Atari programmers left as well, forming a new company that would become Activision. Larry Kaplan, one of Activision's founders, gathered investors to back a new computer project. He recruited Jay Miner and formed a new company called High Toro in 1982 with David Morris as CEO. Their goal was to build a new computer based on the Motorola 68000 CPU. The prototype, codenamed Lorraine after Morris's wife, began to take shape on breadboards. Not long after the project started, Kaplan was lured away by Nolan Bushnell in another business venture. Unfortunately, that deal collapsed and Kaplan never came back, but Miner pressed on. Working with R.J. Michael and Dale Luck, the team pushed the Lorraine project forward, and the company rebranded itself as Amiga. By 1983, the prototype was functional, but money was running out. At the 1984 CES show, Amiga demonstrated the Lorraine. It didn't have an operating system, but it did have a stunning demo, the now famous Boing Ball, the 3D bouncing ball rendered in real time. Crowds were just amazed, and some even accused Amiga of faking it. Atari took notice, and talks began about using the technology for a new console. But as the video game crash hit Atari hard, those plans collapsed. Amiga teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Atari even loaned Amiga $500,000 to keep it afloat, with the agreement that if Amiga failed to repay, Atari would gain the rights to the Lorraine system. But fate took another turn. Commodore, now under Irving Gould, stepped in and outright bought Amiga for $24 million. By late 1984, Amiga's breadboard prototypes evolved into custom chips, Agnes, Denise, and Paula, the original chipset, or OCS. In 1985, the Amiga launched, better known as the Amiga 1000 later. A sleek and modern design, the 1000 showcased multitasking, stereo sound, and graphics far beyond anything on the market. It could display up to 4,096 colors, an unheard of feat for the time. The Amiga 1000 was a bold first step.
We experience the mind unbounded. Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
But Commodore had bigger plans. In 1987, they introduced the Amiga 2000, a machine built for professionals with expandability. It offered slots for expansion cards, hard drives, and even video equipment. This made the Amiga 2000 a top pick for video production studios, where it powered pioneering desktop video setups with the video toaster.
The progress of humankind is written in the history of its tools. Nowhere is this more evident than in the field of the graphic arts. From the crude daubing implements that were used to create the earliest known paintings some 15,000 years ago, to the simple bronze chisels that carved the hieroglyphs on the walls of the tombs of the Egyptian kings, to the precision brushwork of the medieval illuminated manuscripts, to the advent of Gutenberg's movable type printing press, all the way to today's high-speed digital color printing presses. Each time a graphic artist gets a hold of a new and important tool, the result is equally new and important.
That same year, Commodore also brought the Amiga to the masses with the Amiga 500. Compact, affordable, and powerful, the 500 put the Amiga into millions of homes. Gamers embraced it for titles like Shadow of the Beast and Lemmings, while artists and musicians marveled it for its creative capabilities. The 500 would become one of the most beloved Amigas ever.
Aren't you astronauts?
Buzz Aldrin, Gordon Cooper, Scott Carpenter. We like to compare notes with Stevie on the new space station.
Hello?
Hi, Tommy Lasorda for Stevie.
Hey, what's up?
Just a question about moving Randolph to the number 2 position.
Yeah, second, and this'll work. It's perfect.
Hi.
Hey.
We're the Pointer Sisters. Stevie's expecting us.
Well, come in.
We need help with our new album.
Bert Backpack. Little Richard.
The Amiga. Color, sound, graphics, power. At a price to make it truly the computer for the creative mind.
Can you hear me, Steve?
What can the Amiga do? Well, what do you want it to do?
Mr. O'Neill. Stevie is upstairs, but it's kind of crowded. Would you like some fried chicken while you're waiting?
Amiga from Commodore, the computer for the creative mind.
In the UK, Commodore experimented with a rebadged Amiga 2000 called the Amiga 1500. It wasn't much different, often shipping with dual floppy drives but no hard drive, and its limited release keeps it a niche and rare model to find. The Amiga 2500 soon followed, essentially a turbocharged 2000 fitted with an accelerator board using the 68020 or 68030 CPU. This turned it into a high-performance workstation ideal for heavy-duty video and graphics work. Then in 1990, the Amiga 3000 arrived. Sleek and professional, the 3000 featured a Motorola 68030 running at up to 25 MHz, support for a SCSI hard drive, and the new enhanced chipset. It also introduced Amiga OS 2.0 with a cleaner interface and more powerful multitasking. For high-end users, the 3000 was a revelation. Other variants of the 3000 soon followed. The 3000 UX bundled Unix System 5 targeting universities and workstations, while the 3000T, a towered version, offered room for expansion, making it perfect for professionals in the video and graphics industry. But Commodore wasn't only thinking about computers. In 1991, they tried to capture the living room with the CD-TV, the Commodore Dynamic Total Vision. Disguised as a sleek black stereo component, the CD-TV was essentially an Amiga 500 with a built-in CD-ROM drive. Commodore hoped it would pioneer multimedia entertainment, but poor marketing and the high price meant it struggled to find an audience. Back to the mainstream lineup, 1991 also brought the Amiga 500 Plus, essentially a minor upgrade to the original 500. It featured the ECS chipset and 1 MB of RAM. Unfortunately, incompatibilities with some of the older games frustrated fans and Amiga lovers. In 1992, Commodore released the Amiga 600. This tiny system was a shrunken version of the Amiga 500, with the same ECS chipset and a 68,000 CPU. It added a PCM-CIA slot and IDE support, but dropped a numeric keypad. Critics saw it as an odd sidestep, too close to the original 500 to feel new, and lacking the true power that Amiga users wanted. That same year, Commodore unveiled its new flagship, the Amiga 4000. Featuring a Motorola 68030 or 68040 processor and the new AGA chipset, it could display 256 colors on screen from a palette of 16 million. It was powerful, professional, and a major step forward. Alongside it came the Amiga 1200, the true successor to the Amiga 500. Powered by the 68EC020 CPU and the AGA chipset, the 1200 delivered enhanced graphics and 2 MB of RAM standard, all in a compact, affordable package. Gamers embraced the 1200, and it became one of the most popular Amigas of the 1990s. In 1993, Commodore tried to jump into the console market with the Amiga CD32. Built around the same 1200 hardware, it was the world's first 32-bit CD-based game console, or so they say. Unfortunately, supply issues and Commodore's worsening finances doomed its success.
I never found out why he chose me to share his secret. Perhaps because we had similar dreams. But this was twice as fast, twice as powerful as anything I'd ever thought possible. Though what that meant, I could never have foreseen. And colors. So many colors. Our world would never be the same again.
Now, the last, and I would say the greatest Amiga was released in 1994, and that was the Amiga 4000T. A towered version of the 4000, it offered the 68040 CPU, AGA chipset, and massive expansion potential. It was one of the most advanced Amigas ever built. But it arrived just as Commodore was collapsing into bankruptcy, and only a handful were ever produced. And unfortunately for Amiga, the IBM PC clone market was becoming the standard in personal computing. Companies like Commodore, Amiga, Atari, and even Apple were struggling to stay afloat. In May of 1994, Commodore declared bankruptcy. From the groundbreaking Amiga 1000 in 1985 to the rare and powerful Amiga 4000T in 1994, the Amiga line embodied creativity and innovation. These machines weren't just computers, they were tools for artists, musicians, gamers, and visionaries. The Amiga's legacy lives on, not just in nostalgia, but in the countless ways it pushed technology forward and inspired a generation.
Discover a world beyond your wildest dreams. Discover Atari. Pioneers in coin video games like Centipede, Tempest, and Asteroids that challenge you, excite you, test you like never before. Discover the Atari that opened your eyes to the world's most popular home video games like Space Invaders, Missile Command, and Warlords. Discover the Atari that brought you a home computer truly designed for the home. Sophisticated for advanced needs, yet simple enough for your child to use. Compose music, play advanced games, manage your finances, all at the touch of a button. Discover Atari. And discover how far you can go.
The story of the Atari 8-bit line really starts in 1974. It was at this point where the three founders of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, Ted Dabney, and Al Alcorn, decided to acquire Cyan Engineering, an engineering firm that was founded by Steve Mayer and Larry Emmons. They brought on the engineering firm to help with arcade design, but also wanted them to help in the emerging home console market. Atari wanted to compete with Magnavox, which released the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972. So in 1975, Atari released the Pong console. At the time of its release, the Pong console had the most powerful IC that was used in a consumer product. But Atari knew this wouldn't last. Word had gotten out that Fairchild was working on a video game console that used programmable video game cartridges to where you could switch out the games on the console itself. This is a market that Atari wanted to get into. Lead engineers from Cyan Engineering, Steve Mayer and Ron Milner, started working on what would become the Atari VCS, or as we all know it now, the Atari 2600. They started searching for a suitable CPU for the system. In September of 1975, they went to the WestCon trade show in San Francisco. There they saw the 6502 microprocessor for the first time. But unfortunately, at a cost of $25 per unit, it would still be too expensive to put into a consumer product and have it still be affordable for the average consumer. This is when they set up a meeting with Chuck Peddle, the designer of the 6502 microprocessor. Over a period of 2 days, they designed the 6507 microprocessor, which was used in the Atari 2600. To keep costs down, they reduced the package size of the 6502 processor, which was a 40-pin processor, to a 28-pin DIP processor for the 6507. With the reduction of size, also reduced the amount of address lines on the processor. After the 6507 was designed, Petal and MOS Technologies made a deal with Atari to sell not only the 6507 processor, but their newly designed Riot chip at $12 for each, making it $24 for the pair. This was a deal that Atari could not refuse, and it started a good relationship with MOS Technologies. So the last chip that really needed to be designed in-house was the graphics chip for the Atari 2600. So Atari hired on two more engineers, Joe DeCure and Jay Miner. These two engineers helped create what was called the TIA chip, or Television Interface Adapter, which became the graphics chip of the Atari 2600. By 1976, Atari had designed a working prototype called Stella, but even as great as the technology seemed, the engineers for Atari warned them that this technology would be obsolete within just a few years. By late 1976, the design of the Atari 2600 was completed, and Atari engineers started designing the next generation of video game console. But by this time, Atari was facing financial issues. With the arcade division, the Pong consoles, and now the newly designed 2600, along with acquiring the engineers and the engineering firms, had costed Atari millions of dollars, and they were in debt. They needed to find an investor so they could get the Atari 2600 to market. It didn't take long for Atari to find a buyer. Warner Communications bought Atari for $28 million in 1976, but 1977 proved to be quite a different year. Consumer electronics were getting cheaper as cost of ICs were coming down. Companies like Radio Shack, Commodore, and the newly formed Apple Computer were designing their own computers and had released them in 1977. In fact, 1977 is deemed as the year of the personal computer. The Atari VCS, as it was known at the time, was released in September of 1977. As we all know, it went on to become the best-selling second-generation game console. But through 1977 and into 1978, Atari engineers kept working on the new graphics processor for a new video game system that was to be released by 1980 to 1981. But in 1978, big changes were coming to Atari. Warner Communications had hired Ray Kazier as CEO to run Atari. Once Kazier came to the company, he wanted to switch focus from making the new technology a video game console to making it into Atari's first computer. Really, he just wanted to compete with Apple, as seeing how successful they were becoming. This decision caused turmoil at Atari. Many employees and engineers, including the founder, Nolan Bushnell, disagreed with this, and they wanted to continue making a video game console. However, Warner Communications and Kazier now ran the show. Development of the new computer system commenced. And it was at this time that we saw the exodus of the original Atari employees, engineers, programmers, and then the founder, Nolan Bushnell. Jay Miner, however, stayed with Atari. He had been working on a dual-chip architecture using a full 6502 processor for the new video game system, which in turn is now going to be used in the new computer. The first of the two chips is the CTIA chip, or the Color Television Interface Adapter. And really what this chip is the continuation of the development of the original TIA chip that was used in the 2600. The other chip in the design being called the ANTIC chip, or Alphanumeric Television Interface Controller. Now, these two chips work together to create the graphics on the Atari 8-bit. What Atari was developing was way more advanced than anything that was on the market from Apple, Radio Shack, or even Commodore at the time. In fact, Chuck Petal from MOS came and saw what Atari was doing at their development center and said that it was way more advanced than anything that Commodore was doing at the time. And Atari made him sign a non-disclosure statement because, as we all know, MOS was a subsidiary of Commodore, so they didn't want no trade secrets getting out. So the higher-ups at Atari wanted them to take this technology and develop 2 computers out of it. The first one being a low-end machine, basically a hybrid game console / computer, mainly made for kids and for video games. This system would be codenamed Candy. The second system would be a higher-end computer with expansion and ability to add more RAM and more video capabilities such as S-Video. This system would be codenamed Colleen. The names Candy and Colleen came from secretaries that were working at Atari at the time. Initially, the Candy design wasn't even going to have a keyboard. They would offer a separate keyboard you could purchase to plug into the system to use. But by 1979, Atari had seen how the computer market had grown, and they had changed the plans for Candy to become a full-fledged computer as well. They changed the design to include a keyboard, but instead of a normal keyboard, they added a membrane keyboard on it that could resist spills from children. Atari's 2 new computer models were shown at the 1979 Winter CES show, but their names were changed from Colleen and Candy to the Atari 400 and 800 computers. Their names representing the amount of memory they came with, 4 kilobytes for the 400 and 8 kilobytes for the 800. Both machines had expandability, with the 400 being able to be expanded up to 16K and the 800 being expandable up to 48K. The Atari 400 had 1 cartridge slot while the 800 had 2, with both systems sharing 4 joystick ports and similar I/O ports. The 2 computers were released in November of 1979. The reviews were coming in and people were quite impressed with the Atari system for its price range, its graphic capabilities, software, and user friendliness, and not to mention the Atari brand being popular with consumers. Although the computers were successful, they were costing Atari millions to produce. The FCC had stiffened RF regulations, so Atari had to build these systems with robust metal clamshells around them. This and the cost of plastic raised the cost for Atari astronomically. They also found it tough to compete with established computer companies like Commodore, Apple, and Tandy. By 1981, it was reported that off of the sale of 50,000 computers, Atari lost more than $10 million. By this time, Atari knew they had to change something. They had to lower production costs. They started the design of a new 8-bit computer. Atari consulted with MOS Technology again, and they created a chip called the Sally, a customized 6502 processor. This new processor had the capability of running up to 4 MHz. All the while, they had been developing a new graphics chip called the GTIA. This new chip was able to create 256 colors as opposed to the original CTIA chip that could only do 128. The new GTIA chip was compatible with the 400 and 800 computer, so Atari offered an incentive for Atari customers. If your computer was still under warranty, they could replace that or exchange those for free. If it wasn't under warranty, you could bring it to an Atari service center and they would do it for $65. This would upgrade the older 400 and 800 computers with the GTIA chip, giving it 256 colors and supporting the newer software. There were going to be 2 computers made, one codenamed Sweet and one codenamed Liz. But the plan for the dual system launch had stopped, and they took the technologies and developed one computer, which became the 1200 XL. It was shown at the 1983 Winter CES show. The design of the system had changed. It went from the big, bulky, almost a Apple-looking computer to a more sleek, contemporary 1980s design. They also reduced the amount of joystick ports from 4 to 2, gave the computer 64 kilobytes of RAM right out the box, and it came with a better, redesigned keyboard. Atari released the system for $1,000 and were highly criticized for the price point of the computer. In fact, sales slumped and the computer just didn't do very well. Although the computer itself was actually a pretty good computer. It was just the price point that killed it. Atari knew they had to do something, and they had to do something fast to save face. So they decided to go back to the low-end, high-end model like they did with the 400 and the 800. Atari went back to the drawing board and designed two new computers, the Atari 600XL and the Atari 800XL, both of which used design cues from the previously released 1200XL, just in a smaller form factor. The new 600XL and 800XL models were shown at the 1983 Consumer Electronics Show. They were slated to be released in September of 1983, but due to supply chain issues, they were having problems with production. By the Christmas season of 1983, there was a shortage of Ataris on the shelves. All the while, Commodore's products, the VIC-20 and the newly released Commodore 64, were flying off the shelves. But things at Atari were changing. By late 1983, the video game crash was in its full swing. Warner Communications was losing millions of dollars in the video game market. And with increasing competition with Commodore's C64 computer, Warner Communications was looking for a way out. Recently, there had been turmoil at Commodore as well. Commodore founder Jack Tramiel quit the company and started Tramiel Technologies. The timing was just right, and Warner found their buyer, Tramiel. Once Tramiel took over the company, his focus shifted from the 8-bit computer line to the future of 16-bit computers. With the help of former Commodore engineers, they started the design of the Atari ST computer line. Jack had been quoted as saying that the 8-bit Atari line had never been profitable for the company. Only video games had been. Although Atari had sold up to 1.5 million computers to that point. All development and prototypes of any further 8-bit computers was stopped, although production of the 8-bit line was not. Tramiel wanted to cut costs and wanted to continue the 8-bit line to fund the 16-bit line. So Atari got busy designing the XE line of 8-bit computers. The Atari XE would take on new design cues, looking a lot more like the Atari ST, a more modern, updated 80s design. These computers would be the 65XE and the 130XE. The 65XE being essentially an 800XL minus the parallel bus interface, and the 130XE having 128 kilobytes of memory accessible through bank switching. It also included the ECI or Enhanced Cartridge Interface. There were also cost reductions introduced, such as the introduction of the Freddy chip, which integrated most of the discrete LS logic on the motherboard. This line of computers was released in 1985. Sales of the XE line were moderately successful, with the introduction of 16-bit computers such as the Atari ST, the Amiga, and the Macintosh, and with Commodore having the majority of the 8-bit computer line sales of Atari's 8-bits dwindled. By 1986, Tramiel was looking to offload most of the 8-bit inventory they had left. To do this, they introduced a new XE computer, or shall I say game console. The Atari XE-GS was released in 1987. This was to be the last of the Atari 8-bit computers. Marketed as a game console that could be expanded into a full-blown computer, it never was very successful in either the video game console market or the computer market. Although not really a part of Atari's business model anymore, the 8-bit line did continue production until the 1990s. The XE-GS continuing production until early 1991, and the rest of the XE line continuing production until January 1st, 1992, when the entire 8-bit line was discontinued by Atari. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the Atari 8-bit story. It was an amazing 8-bit computer line that brought computing to a lot of people that had never used a computer before, selling over 4 million units in its 13-year lifespan. It was actually quite a successful computer line, with having a huge cult following and making hardware and software for it up to this day.
Let's compare the Macintosh Plus with the Atari 1040 ST. Note the Atari screen is much bigger, and the Atari is in color, good for drawing fruit, let's say. Both use a simple point-and-click system, but Atari's designers make it do more. Listen. The music you're hearing is Atari's, the only one with a built-in MIDI. How much more does all this from Atari cost? Fact is, Atari costs less, 1/2 less.
The story of the Atari ST really starts in the mid-1980s. Now, to truly understand the story of the Atari ST, we have to start with a dramatic moment in computer history: Jack Tramiel's departure from Commodore in 1984. Tramiel, the hard-driving businessman who made the Commodore 64 the best-selling computer of all time, suddenly left after clashing with Commodore's Irving Gould. Just a few months after leaving Commodore, he purchased Atari's consumer division from Warner Communications, and with his sons at his side, Leonard, Gary, and Sam, he set out to build a new line of affordable, powerful computers.
What a turnaround Jack Tramiel has wrought at Atari. Video game pioneer Atari rebounds finally into the black.
A big name in high tech is back in the news, and for a change, the news is good.
Tramiel's philosophy was simple: business is war. And in this war, the new enemy wasn't just IBM or Apple, it was Commodore, his old company, now developing the Amiga. Now, to strike back quickly, Tramiel needed a machine on the market fast. Enter engineer Shiraj Shivji, who had worked with Tramiel on the Commodore 64, along with a lean team of engineers that he brought along with him from Commodore. Shivji began developing what would become the Atari ST in record time. Development of the computer only took a few months, and the first Atari ST, the 520 ST, debuted at the 1985 Consumer Electronics Show. Nicknamed the Jackintosh because of its Macintosh-like interface, it ran the GEM graphical operating system and was powered by a Motorola 68000 CPU, the same chip inside the Macintosh and the Amiga. The ST in the name stood for 1632, referencing its 16-bit external bus and its 32-bit internal architecture. The Atari 520 ST released in June of 1985. What made the ST special was its balance: affordable price, color graphics, and a graphical user interface at a time when IBM's PCs were still mostly text-based.
The Atari 520 ST has twice the power of many business micros. It handles business with ease. It can paint pictures and make them move. Play advanced games. Yet it costs less than £300. The Atari 520 ST. Power without the price.
Atari marketed it as power without the price, and it lived up to that slogan. Now, just like the competition, the ST line quickly expanded. So the 520 ST was really the entry point computer. Then in 1986, Atari released the 1040 ST, which became famous as the first personal computer with a megabyte of RAM for under $1,000.
It's a myth that the IBM PS2 has the most memory for the money. Atari shatters that myth. Fact is, the 1040 ST has 50% more memory, and it sells for a lot less. It's a myth that the Amiga has the most memory for the money. Atari shatters that myth. The 1040 ST has a huge 1 megabyte memory, twice the memory of the Amiga. Face the facts, the Atari 1040 ST is powerful and affordable. Atari shatters the myth.
In 1987, Atari released the Mega ST, a line targeted towards professionals with expandable features. It came in two different models, the Mega ST2 with 2 megabytes of RAM and the Mega ST4 with 4 megabytes of RAM. In 1990, they released the Atari TT. This was supposed to be released as a Unix-based workstation, however those plans never really came to fruition. However, This computer did ship with 2 megabytes of memory and could be expanded up to 16 megabytes. In 1991, Atari released the Atari Mega STE with enhanced blitter graphics and Yamaha YM2149 sound. And it could have 1, 2, or 4 megabytes of RAM. And in 1992, Atari released their last computer, the Atari Falcon. It added more advanced audio and video capabilities, but by then, Atari was struggling to keep up with the rapidly advancing PC world, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in the video. But let's talk a little bit more about the Atari ST. Now, one of its most lasting contributions was its role in music production. Atari made the bold decision to include built-in MIDI ports on the ST, something no other mainstream computer had. This made it an instant hit with musicians, who now could easily connect synthesizers and drum machines to the computer. Throughout the late 1980s and into the early 90s, the Atari ST became a staple in the recording studios, used by artists like Fatboy Slim, The Prodigy, and countless others. Now, of course, the ST had its renowned reputation as being a gaming machine. With its 16-bit Motorola 68000 CPU and strong graphic capabilities, it hosted many of the same titles as the Amiga. In fact, a lot of the games that came out on the Amiga were actually Atari ST ports. While the Amiga generally had the edge on graphics and sound, the ST carved out its own niche, especially in Europe, where it became a popular home computer platform. Games like Dungeon Master, Falcon, and Elite showcased the machine's capabilities. Despite its strengths, the Atari ST couldn't escape the shadow of its rivals. The Amiga was stronger in multimedia, the Macintosh had a loyal creative following, and the IBM PCs began dominating the business world. By the early 1990s, the ST line was losing ground and losing it fast. Atari tried to pivot with the Falcon, but it was too little, too late. By 1993, Atari's focus shifted away from computers entirely, moving back to its roots, releasing a new video game console, the Atari Jaguar. This was the last-ditch effort to save the company, and unfortunately, it just didn't work. Atari Corporation's products were just not that popular. With the discontinuance of the Atari ST line of computers, and then the failure of the Atari Jaguar and the Atari Lynx, they really didn't have any products to sell. And the fact that Atari had won plenty of lawsuits against video game developers and publishers, keeping them afloat, Jack just really wanted out of the business. And in 1996, Jack decided to sell Atari to JTS Incorporated. So what is exactly the legacy of the Atari ST today? For one, it's remembered as a computer that brought music production to the masses, giving rise to a generation of electronic musicians, and it's also remembered as part of the legendary 16-bit wars of the 1980s, when innovation was fast, competition was fierce, and the companies like Atari and Commodore still dreamed of taking down IBM and Apple. But most importantly, the ST represents Jack Tremill's relentless drive. It was a computer born of revenge, competition, and ambition. While it didn't win the war, it left a lasting mark on both computing and culture. The story of Apple Computer really starts in the 1950s. Steve Wozniak was born in 1950 in San Jose, California, and was raised by his mother Margaret and his father Jerry, who was an engineer at Lockheed Martin. A few years later, in 1955, Stephen Jobs was born. His childhood was much different. His parents, Joanne and John, were students at the University of Wisconsin at the time. Stephen's father was of Syrian descent and was Muslim, and that didn't go well with Joanne's father. But the two fell in love, and shortly thereafter, Joanne became pregnant. They decided together to perform a closed adoption, and Joanne flew to San Francisco to have the baby. During the adoption process, Joanne and John wanted the adopted parents to be college graduates. But as the search went on, two candidates that were not college graduates promised they would send the baby to college. These two were Paul and Clara Jobs, and baby Steve was adopted. In 1967, the Jobs moved to Los Altos, California to put Steve into a better school district. He started attending Homestead High School. In 1968, Woz graduated from the same high school that Jobs was going to, but at the time, the two Steves did not know each other. In 1968, Woz started attending Colorado University and studying their new computer science major. Computers always interested Woz, and he was a huge Star Trek fan, and this only added to his fascination. Getting his degree in computer science and electrical engineering was a dream he was fulfilling. But on one fateful day, the always joking and curious Woz got caught hacking the college's mainframe computer system. In 1969, he was expelled from CU and came back to California. He enrolled in the De Anza College in Cupertino and then transferred to the University of California, Berkeley in 1971. That year, for an engineering project, Woz and a young friend of his, Bill Fernandez, built a computer that they called Cream Soda. It was a simple machine consisting of TTL logic and an 8-bit microprocessor, really just chips and switches and LEDs. It was named after the Craigmont cream soda they drank from a local Safeway. Fernandez's dad was mayor and had the paper come out to do an article about the computer. While at the house taking photographs, a journalist stepped on a cord and shorted out the computer, destroying it, much to the dismay of Woz. Shortly after this, Woz was hired on by Hewlett-Packard to work on their mainframe computers. Ironic, right? Around this time, Jobs was attending Homestead High School. When he started there, he was more of an introverted kid that was more into electronics, but started getting into the arts and the hippie, stoner counterculture of the time. As he stated, "It was the first time I got high. I started listening to music a whole lot, and I started to read more outside of just science and technology. Shakespeare, Plato. I loved King Lear." He befriended Bill Fernandez, and the two were both interested in computers and electronics. Bill wanted to introduce the two Steves because of their shared interest in technology. They were introduced, and Jobs came out to visit Woz at Berkeley about once a week. During that summer, Jobs got a summer intern job at HP, and they became close friends. Then they met John Draper, or better known as Captain Crunch. Back then, long-distance phone calls were charged by the minute, and a way to cheat the system was found. The phone company's switches were controlled by tones. If the right tone was played at 2600 Hz, you could make free long-distance calls. In the late 1960s, Draper found a toy whistle that came in a Captain Crunch cereal box that could produce these tones. This was really the first form of hacking. It was called phone phreaking, and it fascinated Woz. Woz started to make an electronic version called the Blue Box. It was a device you could connect to the phone line to make a call, and it automatically provided the signal with the right timing to almost work 100% of the time. Woz, always a prankster, as a joke one time called the Vatican and asked for the Pope, saying he was Harry Kissinger. Jobs saw an opportunity in the Blue Box and wanted to start selling them. This was the first time Woz and Jobs created a product together to sell. Although highly illegal, it showed what could be done between the two. One time, they almost got caught with the devices when they got pulled over by the police, but the cops had no idea what they were and let them go. Now it was Jobs' senior year of high school, and he was really getting into the arts. So much so, he joined the theater club and did lighting and sound. This is where he met Chris Ann Brennan. The two started dating and using drugs such as LSD together. Jobs was quoted talking about a pivotal moment in his life using the drug while in a wheat field. "It was the most wonderful feeling of my life up to that point." After he graduated from Homestead, Chris Ann and him rented a house with a friend until he left to Oregon to Reed College in September of 1972. Jobs dropped out of college just after one semester. He stated he didn't want to burden his parents with the cost, but he also didn't tell his parents that he dropped out. He stayed for the next semester, truly living the counterculture lifestyle, but he was convinced by the president of the student body to sit in on some classes. During this period, he was living off recycled Coke bottles, getting meals at shelters, and sleeping on his friends' dorm room floors. In 1973, Jobs came back to California and got a job working at Atari. Al Alcorn hired him on.
He was hired by Al Alcorn, and that afternoon, he came into my office as though that was the right thing to do. I said, "Hi, what's up?" He says, "I think you've got a really awesome company." Awesome. He uses that a lot. And he said, "I think that everything is pretty good, but I've seen your soldering connections, and they're really crappy. I said, well, let's fix them. And he says, I will. So I put Steve on the engineering night shift, which there wasn't one. But it turned out that I was being a little tricky, because I knew he had a really good friend, Steve Wozniak, who was actually a lot better engineer than Jobs was. And so I got 2 Steves for the price of 1.
While at Atari, Jobs saw a prototype for a new game that was not working correctly, and confidently he said that he could make it more elegant with less chips. Nolan made a deal with Jobs for $100 for every chip that he eliminated in the design. Jobs really had no idea how to do this, but he knew someone that could. He called up Woz, and over a few late nights at Atari, Woz created the game Breakout. Jobs made a deal that he would pay Woz half the money. The design eliminated over 50 chips from the TTL design Atari engineers had come up with. Jobs received $5,000 for his achievement, but he told Woz Atari only gave him $700, meaning Woz only received $350 for his work, which Woz didn't find out about till a few years later. In 1974, Jobs really started getting into Hinduism. Jobs and a friend named Daniel Kotke traveled to India to visit Guru Neem Karoli Baba in a drug-induced spiritual odyssey. That lasted for 7 months until he came back to the United States and lived at the All One Farm commune with his longtime girlfriend Krisan and Kotke, all practicing Zen Buddhism. Jobs returned to California and his job at Atari in 1975.
So one day Steve comes into my office and says, I'm going to go to India to visit my guru. I said, well, wow, okay, well, good luck, right, if you get work. And so he goes off, well, he's going to go off to India, but we had a problem. We were selling these games international now, and when you'd sell them to Germany, let's say this, in this case it was Germany, so I explained, I said, hey, Steve, I got a deal for you. I'll send you to Germany for free. You know, all you have to do is work 1 day with these guys, and then you go to India after that. It's got to be cheaper to get to India from Germany than it is here. He says, great, I'll do that. So Steve goes over. He doesn't even own a suit. And he goes over there, and they're shocked. They're all business people, proper German, and Steve is anything but. And to make matters worse, he solved the problem. And then he goes off to India. 3 months after he left for India, I get one of my engineers came in, Ron Wayne, and said, hey, Steve's back. I said, Steve who? Steve Jobs. Oh, yeah, I remember him, yeah. Well, bring him in. So Steve walks in, and I wish I'd taken a picture. He had saffron robes, shaved head, barefoot, Hare Krishna, you know, and wow. And he said he had a trip in India, and he gives me a Baba Ram Dass book, Be Here Now, and says, can I have my job back? I go, sure, you got your job back. And then at that point, he and Woz had this stupid idea for a home computer. Steve Jobs offered me founder stock in Apple, and I said, I got enough wallpaper, but I'll take a free computer. Would that I had taken the stock.
During all this, Woz was still working at HP, but in 1976 he dropped out of Berkeley to pursue a career at HP in the calculator chip division. Always the prankster and entrepreneur, Woz also ran a call-in joke service. Callers would call his toll number and pay to hear the joke of the day. Once Jobs got back, Woz and him started to hang out once again. One of the places they went together was the Homebrew Computer Club. There, different computers were shown off and displayed for people to share their interests, trade parts, and purchase computers. Woz and Jobs wanted to create their own computer. They watched and learned from the different kits that were being shown. They started to design their own computer. Woz initially wanted the computer to run the Motorola 6800 8-bit CPU, but it was still too pricey at $170 per die. When Moz released the 6502 in 1976 for $20, Woz had his CPU. Woz spent his days working at HP and his nights in his apartment developing what would become the Apple Computer A. Initially, he designed the computer to use the 6800 CPU, but later changed the design to use the 6502 when it was released. But this meant changing the code to work on the new CPU. A true genius, Woz explained it was a simple process to convert the 6800 base system to the 6502. The 6502 and the 6800 are very similar chips, but the 6502 had a performance upgrade, giving Woz even more to work with writing the source code. But there was one problem. Since Woz worked for HP as an engineer, under his employee contract, anything he created was HP property. So he showed it to the HP suits, and they pretty much laughed at it, saying who needed a computer in their house, and also saying there was no market for the personal computer. Since HP didn't want it, the computer was theirs. On April 1st, 1976, the Apple company was formed with Woz, Jobs, and Jobs' former co-worker at Atari, Ron Wayne. Jobs wanted Wayne because he was an older businessman that banks and investors would like. He took a 10% stake in the company, but this didn't last long. Wayne sold off his share of the company back to Apple for $800 2 weeks later. He explained his departure because of a previous business venture that went south and cost him thousands of dollars that gave him cold feet on Apple. But during his time at Apple, he designed the first logo and the instruction manual for the Apple computer. They showed it at the Homebrew Club, and it was a success.
We had absolutely no idea what people were going to do with these things when we started out. Matter of fact, the two people it was designed for was Woz and myself, because we couldn't afford to buy a computer kit on the market. So we liberated some parts from Hewlett-Packard and Atari, and worked on a design for about 6 months and decided that we would build our own computer. So we built one, and Woz was up till 4 in the morning for many moons, and we got it working. We showed some of our friends. Immediately, everybody wanted one. And it turned out that it took about 40 hours to build one of these things and about another 20, 30, 40 to debug it. And we had a lot of friends that worked at similar companies who could liberate the parts also. And we found ourselves spending every spare moment of our time helping our friends to build computers. And it was just getting to be a tremendous drain on our lives. So we got the idea one day that we could make a printed circuit board without the parts in it, and sell these blank printed circuit boards to our friends and probably cut the assembly and debug time down to, 5-10 hours. So Woz sold his HP 6 calculator and I sold my van, and we got $1,300 together, and we paid our friend of ours who was this PC board layout person $1,300 to do us a layout, and decided we'd sell printed circuit boards at twice what it cost to build them and hopefully recoup our calculator and transportation at some later date. So that's what we did, and I was out trying to peddle PC boards one day and walked into a bite shop, the first bite shop in Mountain View, and Paul Terrell, the then owner of the bite shop, said he would like to take 50 of these computers. And I saw dollar signs in front of my eyes. But he had one catch, which was that he wanted them fully assembled and tested, ready to go, which is a new twist. So we spent the next 5 days on the phone to distributors and convinced the electronics parts distributors around here to give us about $10,000 worth of parts on thin air, just on enthusiasm. So we got the parts and we built 100 computers and we sold 50 of them for cash, and 29 days paid off the distributors. And that's how we got started.
The part of the story Steve failed to mention is during this time, Apple was being ran out of Jobs' parents' garage. Since they didn't have anywhere near the amount of computers built that the order required, they needed help in producing that amount of boards for the Byte Shop order. So they hired on Bill Fernandez and Daniel Kotke to help out. When they brought the completed Apple A's, as they were known at the time, to the Byte Shop, the owner Paul Terrell had made a deal for the complete computer. Not just a motherboard, but a computer with a case, a keyboard, and a screen. Jobs had to talk him into honoring the deal, saying that he could make more money selling the individual parts himself with the motherboards, since Terrell had the supply of parts in the store. This gave Jobs the idea for their next computer, a computer with an awesome modern case and a built-in keyboard. Woz saw this as an amazing opportunity to improve on the Apple's design. They continued to sell the Apple I in computer stores at a price of $666.66. In all, 200 Apple I's were produced, and 175 being sold. The money was good, but not enough to design their next computer. However, Woz started designing improvements on the Apple II computer, including adding a cost-efficient color composite signal from a glitch in the NTS signal he engineered. He also included more RAM, integrated some of the TTL logic, bringing the chip count down, and included Apple Basic on a ROM. This is when the first big-time disagreement between Jobs and Woz happened. Woz wanted to add 8 expansion slots and make it an open computer to the user. Jobs wanted 2 slots, one for the disk drive, the other for a modem, and it was supposed to be a closed system. They got into a pretty bad argument when Woz said, "Go get himself another computer," and Jobs knew Woz was serious and agreed to the 8-slot open system. Since coming up with the idea of a new Apple computer, Jobs was busy trying to find investors. Being turned down all over the place, Jobs contacted Nolan Bushnell. He suggested Jobs contact Don Valentine. Valentine wasn't interested either, but he suggested he call Mike Markkula. Markkula came to Apple headquarters, Jobs' parents' garage, and saw the production of the computers. He saw great potential in the fledgling company and invested $92,000 in Apple out of his own pockets while securing $250,000 in a line of credit. He also requested Woz quit his job at HP, which he did in November 1976. With the investment made and a line of credit, things started to roll fast. On January 3rd, 1977, Apple Computer became incorporated. Jobs also had another demand for the system. He wanted it quiet. Since it would be in a case, along with the power supply, he didn't want a fan running to cool it. Traditional power supplies at the time could not do this, but a switching power supply could. He needed someone to design it. He hired a former Atari coworker, Ron Holt, for $200 a day. Jobs hired a freelance designer, Jerry Mannock, to design the case. Jobs was insistent that the case be of modern design, but he didn't want it to look like a computer. He wanted it to look like it fit in a house, like an appliance, but an awesome looking one. In February, Markkula hired on Michael Scott to be the first CEO of Apple Computer Incorporated.
From high technology, the computer store, introducing Apple II, the easy-to-operate home computer. Just hook it up to your TV to create dazzling color displays. Or you can balance your checkbook. Kids can teach themselves arithmetic. Or the family can invent their own Pong games. The possibilities are endless. It's called Apple II, the personal computer. See it at High Technology, the computer store.
On April 16, 1977, the Apple II was debuted at the West Coast Computer Fair. People were flocking to see the Apple booth to see the computer, passing booths of MITS, IBM, and Commodore, their main competitors at the time. It was a huge hit, and they started taking orders that day. Apple even secured a contract to supply computers to a Japanese manufacturing company. Only problem was, like the Apple I, it didn't have enough Apple IIs to fulfill the orders. This is when things really started to take off. Production moved from Jobs' parents' garage to actual factories. At this time, Apple ran a promotion to Apple I owners to trade their boards in to get a discount on a new Apple II. A lot of boards were traded in during the promotion and destroyed by Jobs, with only 82 of the 200 made known to exist today, making an original Apple I computer one of the most valuable computers in the world. It was also at this time that Apple started the change, specifically with Jobs. Woz had stayed the fun-loving, joking engineer, but Jobs was changing, and to the amazement of his close friends, he started wearing business attire. A huge change from the smelly hippie that could only work the night shifts at Atari a few years back. By 1978, due to the success of the Apple II, Apple started designing its successor, the Apple III. They wanted to quickly get it to market to stay ahead of the competition, IBM. The design team was led by Wendell Sander, but soon Steve Jobs got involved in the aesthetic design of the computer. It was his idea to eliminate air venting and fans for cooling to make the computer quiet. This, along with other design faults, caused massive quality issues with the Apple III when it was released. Woz was quoted saying that the design team was led by marketing and not by engineers, leading to the issues of the Apple III. All the while, Woz was busy designing an upgraded model of the Apple II, the Apple II Plus. This model would come standard with 48K of memory, expandable up to 64K with the 16K language card. Due to the 6502 processors only being able to address 64K, which was already taken up by the 48K of RAM, 12K ROM, and 4K of addressing I/O, the language card had to be bank switched to be addressable to the system. This allowed the user to load integer BASIC into the language card to be able to switch between integer and AppleSoft BASIC with just a command. Also, Apple's first disk drive, the Disk 2, designed by Woz, was released. Around this time, Jobs was informed his longtime girlfriend, Chris Ann, which was working in the shipping department at Apple, was pregnant with his child. Jobs vehemently denied this, stating it was not his and she had to be sleeping around, which was not the case. This was really the beginning of Jobs' mental spiral downward that would eventually see him ousted from Apple. Two theories that revolve around why this happened. One due to him being a foster child and not having his real parents to raise him, and it has been brought up that his heavy drug use earlier in life may have been a contributing factor. But to him, he could not be bothered with the distraction of being a father. After utterly being embarrassed by Jobs, Chrisann left Apple to have the baby at the all-in-one farm commune in Oregon, with no support from the millionaire Jobs. In May of 1978, Chrisann gave birth to a baby girl. Jobs worked with Chrisann to come up with the name Lisa, all while denying she was still his.
I'm here with an average American homemaker with her own Apple personal computer. Jill, do you use your Apple for household budgeting?
Actually, I'm working in gold futures.
Well, you could probably put a lot of recipes in there, huh?
Mm-hmm. And you can do trend analyses, generate bar graphs.
Are you really a homemaker?
Of course.
So Apple is the appliance of the 80s for all those pesky household chores.
I also own a small steel mill.
In June of 1979, the Apple II Plus was released and the original Apple II was discontinued. With the launch of the Apple II Plus, it expanded to other regions like Europe and Japan, with the introduction of the Apple II Euro Plus and the J Plus. Apple produced another version of this computer under license with Bell & Howell, a black Apple II Plus with added AV capabilities and marketed as AV equipment. By this time, Woz was already working on another improved model of the Apple II, which would later become the Apple IIe. Also in 1979, Jobs, Woz, and the head engineers of Apple visited the Xerox PARC campus to check out a new computer design. It had a graphical user interface and used a device called a mouse. The computer was a Xerox Star. Xerox made a deal with Apple to sell the technology to them for $1 million of Apple stock. The technology from this was used in Apple's first GUI-based computer, the Lisa, which was named after Jobs' daughter, although he denied it for years, saying that it stood for Logically Integrated Software Architecture. But in later years, he confirmed that it was named after his daughter. Jobs then moved on to the Lisa team.
Computers have always scared me. I grew up believing that only scientists and engineers could understand them. Then I started to work with Apple personal computers, and I learned how easy it is to use one. You can do sales forecasting and general bookkeeping and even financial charts and graphs. See? Frankly, at the moment, I have no reason to do all of these things, but who knows? Show business being what it is, I might.
Apple, the personal computer.
By 1980, the Apple III, which was deemed by Jobs as not the successor to the Apple II, but an enhancement of it for the ultimate hobbyist computer, was released. But unlike the Apple II, this computer was strictly marketed towards business and education, and not the home user. The cost of the unit was staggering, between $4,000 to $8,000 for the unit in 1980, which is between $14,000 and $31,000 in today's money for one desktop computer. This priced out the average home user. Cost and issues with the hardware were coming to the forefront. One of the main problems with the system is the lack of ventilation and fans. The system overheated, causing solder joints to come loose during operation, and crashed the overly priced computer. Apple's official fix for the problem was, get this, to pick the computer up off the table 2 inches and drop it onto the table to reseat the chips inside. No joke. This is what Apple sent out to Apple III users as an official fix. This did not bode well for the new computer or Apple's customers. For all it's worth, the Apple III was a great upgrade from the Apple II on paper. It had a 1.8 MHz Cybertech SY6502A CPU and came with 128K of RAM, and had a hard drive in development. Due to the issues the computer was having, Apple went back to the drawing board and fixed the issues plaguing it. In 1981, they released the Apple III Revised Edition. This computer fixed the quality issues of the original and gave the computer the ability to be upgraded to 256K of RAM. Apple also started replacing customers' faulty original Apple III units. Later in 1981, Apple introduced the Profile, a 5 MB hard drive for use with the Apple III. In February 1981, Woz was piloting his Beechcraft airplane with some friends and crashed on takeoff. His 3 passengers and himself were injured in the crash. Woz took the brunt of the impact with serious facial lacerations, missing teeth, and head trauma. For weeks, Woz had anterograde amnesia, a condition that doesn't allow the brain to make new memories. Woz had no memory of the crash. He took a leave of absence from Apple to go back to school for an engineering degree. He said at the time, it was like a reset button was pressed in his head, and he just didn't enjoy design and engineering. At the time of the plane crash, Woz was one of the lead engineers on a new computer project, which would become the Macintosh. At this point, Jobs was pulled from the Lisa team and reassigned to the Mac project. During his leave, Woz went on to fund and create music festivals. This was not very lucrative, and he came back to Apple in 1983. During Woz's absence, Apple's first CEO, Michael Scott, was replaced by Apple's biggest investor, Mike Markkula, in 1981. Markkula really didn't want to be put in this position and was quoted as saying he would only stay for 4 more years at Apple. That didn't prove to be the case, as he stayed with Apple until 1997, serving in many different roles with the company. The last version of the Apple III was the Apple III Plus, which was released in 1983. It came with 256K of RAM, included a real-time clock and a redesigned keyboard, and it had an interlaced video port. But the damage had already been done due to the early quality issues and the price point of the computer. The Apple III went on to sell around 120,000 units in total and was discontinued in 1985, losing Apple over $60 million in the process. It was Apple's first commercial failure, with the ill-fated 16-bit Lisa having an even shorter lifespan, being discontinued in 1986. Big changes were coming to Apple in 1983. Apple replaced Markkula with John Sculley. This move was encouraged by Jobs. He even personally talked Sculley into leaving PepsiCo as their CEO by saying, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or come with me and change the world?" This is a move Jobs would soon regret. While all this was going on, Woz and the Apple II team were ready to release the Apple IIe, an enhanced version of the Apple II Plus. This computer featured a redesigned keyboard with a built-in repeat function, full cursor keys, open and closed Apple keys, a new lowercase ASCII character set. It also came standard with 64K of RAM and implemented an auxiliary slot, which was used with the 80-column card to increase the memory of the computer up to 128K with bank switching, and gave the computer the ability to display in 80 columns. Also, they integrated a lot of the TTL logic that was on the board for a smaller chip count and greater reliability.
To reaffirm its commitment to this winning product, Apple has enhanced the Apple II to meet consumers' and dealers' broadening expectations about personal computing. Apple has taken the Apple II, refined its design, and added some of the most popular features available on personal computers. The result is the Apple IIe, a personal computer that is more reliable and easier to use. In fact, it's the most personal computer.
The Apple IIe was released in 1983 and became the most successful and longest-lasting computers Apple produced. With the help of the education sector, Apple found their way into almost every school in America, raking in the cash for the company. The Apple II team should have been rewarded for bringing in so much cash to Apple, but this is not what happened. Jobs was still working on the Mac project and had started to divide the company, the Apple II team against the Mac team. Bitter infighting within the company started, with the Apple II team not getting any accolades for their work, even though they were bringing in at least 85% of the profits for the company after the Mac launched in 1984. the board members were starting to take notice of the monster that Jobs had created within Apple.
Look what the computer wizards at Apple have come up with now. It has the power of these two computers, a built-in disk drive. It can run over 10,000 different programs. You get everything you need to hook it right up to your TV. You can even add a mouse. Introducing the Apple IIc. Now comes the real magic. You can take it home for under $1,300.
Also in 1984, the Apple IIc was released. It was Apple's first portable computer, portable being used loosely here. This was basically an Apple IIe in a smaller form factor. It came with 128K of RAM and an 80-column mode built in. It also had a serial port but lacked any expansion ports, the first Apple not to be expandable. They also upgraded the IIc with the Apple IIc Plus in 1988. The first upgrade was the addition of the 3.5-inch floppy drive instead of the 5.25-inch drive that came on the standard IIc. The last change was putting the power supply unit inside of the actual computer itself instead of having the external brick. In 1984, the Macintosh launched to much fanfare, but was not the success that Jobs had anticipated and the Apple board had its doubts about. This was due to multiple issues, such as the cost of marketing and parts, all of which really came down to decisions that Jobs made during the development. By 1985, the Apple II and Mac infighting at Apple had come to a head. Woz felt as if the Apple II team was not appreciated, and nor was he. He was quoted saying, "Apple has been going in the wrong direction for at least 5 years," and Apple had become the bane of his existence, and he missed the fun of the early days. Woz departed the company and sold most of his stock when he left Apple. With low sales of the Macintosh, the Apple II versus Macintosh interfighting, the loss of their most brilliant engineer, Woz, the board was looking for a way to get rid of Jobs. Then the final blow came with Microsoft's introduction of Windows. Jobs had basically given Bill Gates and Microsoft the keys to the Macintosh to develop software for it, trusting Gates. Microsoft reverse engineered Mac OS and turned it into their own, Microsoft Windows. With all the blunders Jobs had made, it was time for a change. Jobs got wind of this and tried to stage a takeover of Apple, but failed miserably. At this point, he tried to resign, but his resignation was denied. The board put it to a vote in September and approved his resignation, leaving to form Next Incorporated. With the departure of Apple's founders, the story of the Apple 8-bits doesn't stop there. Production of the Apple IIe continued with the Platinum Edition. It had a few more upgrades to it, like the addition of a number keypad to the keyboard.
Dad!
Just a second, Martin.
Hey! Mom, come on.
Be out in a minute.
Hey! And you're not there.
I'm busy, Martin.
I don't care. I'm coming in.
Don't you dare.
An Apple II GS can do over 10,000 things for your family.
My computer.
Maybe even teach them to share.
But the biggest upgrade was the design that was started by Woz before he left the company. A computer that used the WDC65C 816 16-bit CPU, but was backward compatible to the 8-bit Apple IIe. This became the Apple II GS. It either sold as a new computer, or you could send your Apple IIe in and have them swap out the motherboard, backplate, and the PSU and turn it into a 2GS. In 1991, the Apple II card was introduced, giving the Mac Color Classic and the Mac LC computers Apple II compatibility. Really, it was an Apple II running on a card, allowing the use of the Apple II joysticks, paddles, and disk drives. The Apple IIe was finally discontinued in 1993 when John Scully was replaced by Michael Spindler as CEO, marking the end of the 8-bit era for Apple. From 1977 until 1993, Apple sold over 6 million Apple II computers, making it the best-selling computer made by Apple.
Computers for the home are really popular items. But which one's right for you? These? Powerful but very expensive. These? You want more software cartridges. This? Can't expand or program it right away. Which leaves this, the home computer from Texas Instruments. Memory, programmability, expandability, price, plus a full range of software cartridges. This is the one.
The home computer from Texas Instruments.
The story of the TI-99 really starts in the 1960s. In the 1960s and 70s, Texas Instruments was riding high. They invented the integrated circuit and became one of the most powerful semiconductor companies on the planet. By the mid-1970s, they were dominating the electronic calculator market thanks to their vertical integration, meaning they'd made their own chips and finished their own products. At the time, Commodore was making calculators too, but they relied on chips from TI, and when TI decided to undercut everybody by releasing their own calculators at rock-bottom prices, they squeezed Commodore out of the business entirely. Commodore founder Jack Tramiel took that personally. He saw what TI had done and vowed that Commodore would never again rely on another company's components. That decision would come back to haunt TI in a big way, as Commodore bought MOS Technologies and had their own chip division now. Meanwhile, just like Commodore, TI started looking towards a new frontier, home computers. At this time, TI started developing their own personal home computer. By 1979, Texas Instruments released the TI-99-4, one of the first consumer home computers with a 16-bit CPU. At a time when Apple, Atari, and Commodore were still shipping an 8-bit system, TI went big and expensive. The CPU at the heart of this machine was the TMS-9900, a chip that they pulled directly from TI's 990 series of mini computers. These are the kind of computers that you would find in laboratories and in industrial control systems. The technology from these computers was made into a single-chip CPU. Now, the TMS-9900 was a real 16-bit processor with 16-bit registers and instructions. But here's the twist. The TI-99's design bottlenecked it. Due to cost-saving decisions, almost all the memory and peripherals were connected through an 8-bit data bus. So despite the CPU's power, performance was often worse than the cheaper 8-bit machines like the Apple II or the Atari 400. Worse still, the keyboard was a terrible calculator-style chick-lick mess, and it lacked even basic lowercase support. This thing was priced for professionals, but felt like a toy. Being priced at $1,150 in 1979, it was even more expensive than the pricey Apple II, which only cost $990. All this led to consumer complaints of the system about how cheap it was made and how expensive it was. By 1981, TI had seen the complaints and launched the TI-99-4A, a revised and improved version. It had a real keyboard with full travel keys, support for lowercase characters, and came in a slick silver and black case. TI also improved the basic interpreters slightly and lowered the price to be more competitive. Its introductory price was $525. Even at that lowered price, it was still pretty pricey, as the system did have the TMS-9918A video chip, which supported 16-color graphics, hardware sprites, and decent resolutions for the time. It also had the SN76489A sound chip, the same one that later ended up in Sega's Master System and the BBC microcomputer. Texas Instruments also began pushing educational software, bundling cartridges and promoting the system heavily in schools and department stores. They really wanted this thing to be a family computer.
For the first time in his life, he's struggling, having a hard time in math. He needs help. He can get that help with the home computer from Texas Instruments. It has more educational cartridges than any other computer. They challenge, encourage, make learning fun. The home computer from Texas Instruments. It can give your child a head start in school that could last a lifetime.
The TI-99 used what was called command modules for the software, and basically what these are just cartridges, just like any other game system would have. Now, they didn't have much third-party support, So games like Munchman was their Pac-Man knockoff. They had Parsec, which was a fast-paced side-scrolling shooter, Alpiner, where you dodged obstacles climbing a mountain, and Tunnels of Doom, which was an early RPG with graphics and sound. TI also released a speech synthesizer, a futuristic add-on that allowed the computer to talk. It sounded like a robot, but it was seriously cool for the 1980s. And then there was the Peripheral Expansion Box, or better known as PEB. A beast of a unit that added floppy disk drives, RS-232 ports, RAM expansion, and even more. The PEB made the TI a real home computer workstation, but it also added a lot of bulk and a lot of cost. Now, by 1982, 1983-ish, Commodore had struck back with the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64. They were selling like hotcakes, and Jack Tramiel slashed the prices aggressively, daring other manufacturers to keep up. TI took the bait. They slashed the TI-99 4A's price over and over and over, dropping it from $525 to $300 to $150 and then to $99. And at the very end, it was selling for $49.99. They were losing a lot of money on every sale. Now Commodore, with its in-house chip manufacturing thanks to MOS Technologies, could absorb the losses. TI just couldn't do this. It was poetic. The company that once drove Commodore out of the calculator market was now being bled dry by the same company's aggressive pricing tactics. Jack Tramiel's revenge was complete. By late 1983, TI's home computer division had lost hundreds of millions of dollars. Despite shipping millions of TI-99 units, they couldn't compete with Commodore, Atari, Apple, and others in the long run. In October of 1983, TI announced that they were exiting the home computer market entirely. And just like that, the TI-99 era was over. Left behind were bargain bins full of $50 TI computers, a warehouse full of unused PEBs, and one of the greatest what-if stories in computing history. Today, the TI-99 is remembered with a lot of nostalgia. It was the first 16-bit home computer with sprite graphics, and one of the first computers with speech synthesis, long before the others did all that. There's also a vibrant community of enthusiasts keeping it alive, with homebrew games, modern SD card loaders, and new PEB alternatives. Now, it may not have been a winner back in its day, but it helped push the industry forward and gave us one of the best high-tech revenge stories in computing history.
For those parents who realize that $600 isn't too much to spend to expand their child's world, Radio Shack has the perfect gift. The TRS-80 computer, the most significant investment a parent can make. Programs for your child's education or your business, finance, and home use. Let your children discover tomorrow's technology today. The TRS-80, the biggest name in little computers. Only at Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
The story of the Radio Shack computers really starts in the mid-1970s. By then, Radio Shack had thousands of stores across America. They were everywhere. Indoor big malls, strip malls, and even tucked away into small little towns. The company had a reputation for spotting trends, and in 1975, one of their buyers, Don French, spotted a big one. French had been fascinated by the MITS Altair, a computer kit that had just electrified hobbyists. He convinced his bosses that Radio Shack should build a computer of their own, but not a kit. He wanted something that anyone could walk into the store, take home, and actually use right off the shelf. To make this happen, French brought in Steve Leininger, a young engineer from the Homebrew Computer Club in Silicon Valley. Together, they pitched the project to Radio Shack president Louis Cornfield, who cautiously agreed. And behind the scenes, company founder Charles Tandy gave the green light. Leininger worked feverishly to design a machine that was both affordable and practical. The result was the TRS-80 Model 1, launched on August 3, 1977. For $599, customers got a complete system, the computer, a monitor, and even a cassette deck for storage. The name TRS-80 stood for Tandy Radio Shack Z80 processor. Inside, it ran Microsoft's BASIC, an early and very important deal for Microsoft, Bill Gates and his tiny company at the time. Nobody expected it to sell very well, but the Model 1 exploded. Stores couldn't keep up. Thousands of units were backordered, and in just months, Radio Shack went from a place where you bought parts to the biggest name in little computers. Now, with success brought confidence, and in 1979, Radio Shack launched the Model 2, aimed at small businesses. It was a serious machine with 8-inch floppies and a professional design, though it wasn't compatible with the Model 1, and this caused a lot of headaches and confusion for the consumers. Meanwhile, the consumer line evolved with the Model 3 in 1980 and the Model 4 in 1983, and that was including the 4P, a portable, and I say that loosely, portable computer. Behind the scenes, executives like John V. Roach helped push these projects forward and kept Radio Shack aggressive in the market.
From Radio Shack, the TRS-80 Model 3. And at $200 off, it's a great value. Select from Radio Shack's huge program library to aid your children's education, plan your personal and household budgets, or to entertain with fast-action games. You can even learn to write programs. The TRS-80 Model 3, on sale for $7.99, only at Radio Shack and Radio Shack Computer Centers, the computer experts.
In 1983, Radio Shack decided to dive into the portable market and unveiled something groundbreaking, the TRS-80 Model 100. Built in partnership with Kyocera, with software by Microsoft, including code personally written by Bill Gates, the Model 100 was one of the first truly successful notebook computers. It found its way into a very niche market. Journalists, they just adored it. It booted instantly, had a built-in modem, and could run for hours on AA batteries. For reporters on the road, it was magic.
It's a Radio Shack Merry Christmas.
This Christmas, Radio Shack's best-selling portable computer, the Tandy 102, is a better gift than ever. It has 5 built-in programs, and now it's slimmer and lighter and on sale for only $3.99. Save $100. So when you give the Tandy 102, you've got Christmas in the desk, in the briefcase, or in the bag.
Tandy portable computer, sale price from $3.99.
While the TRS-80 line handled business and classrooms, Radio Shack also wanted to reach hobbyists and gamers. Enter the Color Computer, or the COCO for short, launched in 1980. Based on the Motorola 6809 chip, it ran Microsoft Color Basic and later expanded with Microware's OS 9, a multitasking operating system. The COCO 3, released in 1986, added the custom Gimme chip, more RAM, and real 80-column text. The COCO earned a cult following that still exists to this day.
Some people have big plans after school. You know what Elliot's going to do? Jeff, too. Elliot's at work on a book report using scripted on Radio Shack's Color Computer 3. It hooks up to his TV. And Jeff's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3 playing the newest football game. But wait, what's Elliot doing playing new Super Pitfall? And Jeff's having a blast with a new math tutor. You never know what you might try with more than 100 programs for fun and learning. Radio Shack's Color Computer 3 comes with everything you see here. Other items each sold separately. Only at Radio Shack.
By 1983, Radio Shack figured that computers needed to be standardized, and they looked upon IBM's PC Standard. Radio Shack introduced the Tandy 2000, a fast MS-DOS computer powered by the Intel 8186. On paper, it was ahead of its time, but it wasn't fully IBM PC compatible, a fatal flaw. Software often didn't run right, and customers noticed.
Buy my computer.
Hey, buy my computer. No, buy my computer.
There's one way to cut through today's computer clutter. Compare other business computers with Radio Shack's Tandy TRS-80 Model 2000. Judge the ease of operation, speed, graphics, software, and price. Compare. I believe your informed buying decision will be the Tandy 2000 personal computer.
See it during September at $300 off. We invite comparison.
But Radio Shack learned quickly. The very next year, they released the Tandy 1000. Inspired by IBM's failed PC Junior, it kept the fun features, better graphics, 3-voice sound, joystick ports with real compatibility. The Tandy 1000 became one of their biggest hits and cemented Radio Shack as a major player in the DOS gaming era.
Radio Shack. Here it is. The Tandy 1000 SL computer system. IBM PC compatible and sale price for under $9.99. Save $200.
Comes complete with color monitor and built-in DeskMate software.
Word processing, graphics, worksheet.
I've never seen one so easy to use.
Greetings. Need directions back to your planet?
This technology is more advanced than we thought.
And we saved $200.
Beam it up.
Save $200 on the Tandy 1000 SL system. Less than $999 only at Radio Shack.
By the early 1990s, the market had been PC standardized. Companies like Commodore and Atari were in their last years of operation. The PC standard had taken over, and companies like Compaq were becoming more successful. PCs were just PCs now, and their uniqueness was no longer an advantage. Radio Shack even introduced multimedia systems like the Tandy Sensation, but the writing was on the wall.
Presenting the first high-performance machine designed for your family, with such standard features as a CD system with full stereo sound, messaging center, easy-to-open windows, and plenty of storage room. All with the power and speed to get your family where you want to go. The Tandy Sensation, not just IBM PC compatible, family compatible. Take your family for a test drive to your neighborhood Radio Shack.
In 1993, Radio Shack sold its computer manufacturing business to AST Research. After more than 15 years in the industry, Tandy was out of the PC game. But looking back, it's easy to forget just how much of an impact Radio Shack really had. From the scrappy TRS-80 Model 1 in 1977 to the Tandy PCs of the early 1990s. These computers made Radio Shack what they were during that time frame. And many people remember going into Radio Shack, buying these, or even playing with these computers. After this, Radio Shack's business model switched to cell phones. They stuck with this business model until they eventually went out of business in 2015.